My name is Adam Friedman. I'm the host of a podcast, The Future of People Initiatives. It has begun to merge more from a podcast into an emerging market, and I kind of feel more like a reporter than I do a host. Reporting to you live as I meet amazing innovators that are helping us define this emerging market. I want to introduce you to Mark, the latest innovator to join our group. And Mark is our first CEO, as in Chief Experience Officer, right? Interesting. The focus is on experience internally and externally. To my knowledge, Mark is going to be the recipient of an award, again, to my knowledge, of being on this journey for the longest of anyone I've met to date, 14 years. In Mark's words, check this out.
So I've had a large kind of runway. So I've been blessed to have a lot of different kinds of experience. The team that I'm on, really set out with one thing. It's like, what's the best of Mark Mathias? So I was given a golden ticket and said, define that. And so we kind of translated from, I had each pocket, I mushed a couple together. I got out of that. I started org development because we had rapid growth, speed of business. So all of it said, we finally landed on with some brilliant minds who surround me, by the way. I have partners in this that are absolutely what I would consider the best in the experience business. As this umbrella experience. And so right now, experience consists of a few things. We just had this talk the other day because I was quizzing the team. I'm like, what's essential, right? And they said, well, first of all, internal comm. So you have to think corporate communications. It's essential, not for what you think, right? Everyone thinks, oh, then you get to send out, and as you commoditize talent within your organization, you're just pitching and stuff. No, we actually need to clear the noise.
As you can see, Mark has been on this journey for quite some time, and one of the questions that we pondered with Mark is how do we approach the employee experience? It's almost a bottomless, where do you begin? How do you pick the moments that matter? Listen to the way Mark is approaching the internal capabilities for the employee experience, and what's interesting and fascinating is that internal communication is coming up with every conversation so far in the podcast. See you in a second.
You better have other things in place for them to be able to advance their career. So this organizational development came as part of it. And then talent, right? And at Signature Performance, we've changed from a human resource group to a talent organization. I look at everyone I coach and work with as talent. The underpinning belief is that everyone has the answer within them. It's the organization's job to give process and method to pulling it out of the individual so that they can do their best work on what they're working on. So we have talent operations, which would be your typical, human resource, all the data, everything we need to do to stay compliant. And then you have talent acquisition, which we specialized because the attraction phase, call that the marketer in me. I recognize that to get the greatest talent, we've got to get this message we've kind of curated inside out to the general public, and talent acquisitions and the recruiting team that we have put in place is essential for that.
What is fascinating about Mark and other innovators that I've met so far, their conversations do start with their purpose and their beliefs and the underpinnings. Listen to Mark's approach on the foundational belief that everyone has the answers within them.
I'm making this up, Adam. Psych ops, right? What's the psychology of the organization? And from my perspective, it's a coaching perspective. I literally, when we began our transformation, did one-on-one coaching with about every associate I could get in front of to help them see their strengths, their unique talents, unique gift. Because I knew at one time, at some point, that question was going to be asked. And I didn't need a majority. I needed everybody on board. And that's exactly what we got.
Life of innovators is not easy, right? Starting something new, by definition, 2.5% get it. The rest, 97.5% across the market, do not yet see it or need more proof. So I asked Mark, let's share with our audience. Has it been easy for you? Because you do hold the title of the longest innovator on the journey we've met to date. Listen to what he has said. I'm going to simplify the debate in the following way. Is it possible to, you said the words match, external to internal, right? Is it possible to match without unification of the, I don't want to say the word ownership, but maybe the at least the ownership of the message in that experience between external and internal, because one person can't own everything. They can't be in charge of operations like that. That's not practical. But at
Right.
least from a messaging perspective, so is it possible, in your view? Yeah, that's the heated debate. I'm even reliving the debate right now as
Yeah,
we're talking here.
yeah, and so it's a debate in our corridor as well. Adam, I'm optimistic. I think it is. You have to draw correlations in the data, and I will tell you that when we talked, right, I built this inside out. So my data is strongest in how the transformation internally is going, and I rely a lot on matching it to the data on the external side. So you've had other people on who've talked about some of the key metrics, and we utilize those as well. So we're looking at attraction, we're looking at retention. How are we doing? What does that mean? I look at referral rates. So when you think of associate, we call our employees associates. When you think of that, we measure ANPS as a component of the overall engagement score. We do 1 external, 3 internal. And then I take that data and then we plug it to outcomes. And so just like a marketer would do with a campaign, we had a Love Your Monday campaign. We looked at the impressions, we looked at the output, we looked at how much talent was entering our pipeline and wanting to join our team. And then we took validation from outside of the organization so that we could say, okay, we don't have any kind of confirmation bias going on here. This is what we're getting. This is what we're seeing. And to be honest, Adam, when I talk with peers in industry, even with folks that are at much larger organizations, I was just at Qualtrics X4 conference. I'm really proud of what we've built here.
Breakthrough alert, at least from my perspective. I hope you all agree. The more we talk about bringing the marketing mindset toward the employee experience, consumerizing, meeting the pressure to consumerize the employee experience, the more the common sense question becomes, well, what will that team look like? Is it a department? Perhaps you're going to call it an internal agency. Is it going to be within the marketing function or the people and HR function? And then, quite simply, well, what are the first hires? Right? What are the first hires as you think about building the internal audience marketing capabilities? This is what Mark had to say. And so I want to go back to the ROI, and I understand that there's a lot of privacy by your success. You can't, certain things you can divulge, certain things you can't. You work with the government, you work in the healthcare industry. So my ask of you, right, to the degree that you're allowed, would you mind bolstering a little, just enough? Because the folks that are listening in, I want to connect the dots for them in a very clear way, because you, in some ways, you're thinking like a marketer, impressions internally. You're thinking about it in funnels. And then this leads to X. What has it led to, Mark, to the degree that you can share publicly?
Yeah. So when we began the transformation, like when I joined Signature Performance, now keep in mind that the seeds of what I'm talking about here have been built in since conception, as an idea, as a hope, as an aspiration. But being able to bring it together and really try, we've had rapid growth. I would say this, Adam, that we've grown from a federal standpoint, from a small business to we did a little pit stop at a medium business. And then we are now in the large business category. So when you think about the multiple, multipliers of revenue that has to happen to functionally move through that, that in and of itself is a story. From the talent development and size and scope, an organization that started with 4 entrepreneurial thinkers, now we have about 1,700 overall that support our organization. Which, if you're at a really huge company, I know you're saying, well, you're still small to me. No, it's when you come from 4, I'm telling you, that's quite a journey. You have to have stuff wired pretty tight to make it. And so we've seen that kind of growth. And I would say even through pandemic, when things were winding down, pivoting 80% of our workforce in less than 3 days to securely meet the needs of our clients without missing one beat in our metrics was just one testimony to what we're doing. We also have an expanding market. So we're generating new opportunities, bigger problems to solve in healthcare. And we really have an inflow of talent who wants to join this team. And not just talent, diverse, the best talent from around the country now is kind of lining up at our door to say, hey, I want to be part of this. It's a little bit different. And so those are a few things that I would say. We have a associate net promoter score I'll share with you that's typically above 50 all the time. A high, we were about close to 80. At one point. And so we measure that. My personal metric and what I hold the team to is we won't see a variation, that's more than 10 points. Too much, too high. I'm asking myself, well, that's great. I'm glad people are bought in, but then I have to stabilize it and say, how do I keep them satisfied for the future? And I don't want them working the ANPS system. If it's too low, then I'm saying, hey, we have an issue. Same thing with things like our retention statistics. By the way, Signature Performance, we've evolved from processing medical claims, the talent and technology behind that, to actually supporting via a contact center. And so when you get in the call center world, that's an entire different string of metrics and an entire different job. Because having that phone, and we deal with complicated issues in veterans' lives. And we love veterans. We just absolutely do. We serve the community. So how do we do that and maintain a high NPS? It's rare. I don't know if I've seen it, certainly not in my local community, but that's an NPS we're maintaining, even though we've expanded into typically kind of a world that says, I just don't want to be in a call center type environment. And we're solving some really complex healthcare issues for important people face to face. And so it's really been kind of a great way to illustrate the kind of impact that we're having, both for veterans across the nation and then healthcare providers who really need a break. They do. This administrative stuff is out of control. It's too expensive. We've got to lower that, and they need a respite from it so that they can treat patients.
Where the conversation took us next is really interesting in context of my journey. About 8 years ago, after interviewing hundreds of folks for Inc. and publishing a book, one of the things that was very clear to me, for the majority of the world, there's a major disconnect between the external brand, right, and the internal brand. Even as we look at dimensions of how you bring purpose and values to light, how you communicate that externally and internally. Mark took on the question, is it possible for external brand to match the internal brand? Check it out.
So we started with internal comm because nobody was hearing anybody because everybody was talking over everybody. So when we started to consolidate, the very first thing we did is we took our efforts, focused on that, and fixed it. How do we quiet things down, push out what needs to be pushed, and have a single source of truth for our internal communications that would lead then to the branching into the external brand? So once we felt like we really had a handle on that and people were actually reading their emails again and not mad at everybody all the time for the amount and volume of emails that were coming in, that's when development came in. And so you have to have this really tight partnership with that. Now, there's another debate, and Adam, you've probably stayed up late talking about this. Does this associate development, does this soft skills training, is this coaching, is this really important in organizations? And I would tell you this, it is vital. In order for this to be successful, you have got to raise the EQ or the whatever you want to call it within the company so that human connection can happen. Because belief is always broken if there's a missing link. And so we're always looking at ways that we can reinforce those skills. And by the way, can you measure them? Well, we measure them in the output. How's our client experiencing them? We measure them through programs that we've committed. This is a statistic we just found the other day. I found it fascinating. People, our associates, our talent, who's engaging in our educational curriculum. And we have all kinds, right now I'm on a big well-being kick. So we have a 40-day immersive well-being program for our associates called the Aloha Method of Well-Being. And it's daily for 40 days. People who are getting involved with our program are staying a year or more. We have less than a percentage of those people engaged in the learning that are leaving. Now think about that for a second. So how important is it? Very important. So we started out with CorpComm, then we went to development, and then is when we actually started broadening this out. And the work we're doing now that we're going through this transformation as we speak is from human resources, to talent operations. And that is a transformation that everyone in my human resource team had their hands up saying, we want to be known as something different. I don't want to be the compliance person. I want to have human to human relationships. And so we're now navigating and transforming that. But if you can measure where you're at, whatever you're building on, focus on it sharp enough just to get that right, you'll start to kind of, I always use that flywheel analogy, make a click away at the flywheel. And then like John Maxwell always says that momentum solves 85% of your problems. Get momentum in one part. Get really good at it. Be the best that people have ever seen. Let that momentum carry you. And then you just start the transformation from the inside out, one thing at a time. I don't know if it needs to be internal comm, Adam, to be honest with you. That's just where Amy's specialty was. That's where my inclination was as a people person. And that's where we started. But I thought it was brilliant because we had noisy airwaves and no one was listening anyway. So at that point, I wasn't going to get any messaging across effectively until we had that a little bit better managed.
And it is not a small lift to make sure that your external brand matches your internal brand. And we have to talk about the ROI, right? We have to get out of this is a nice to have, and this is a mission critical approach, initiative that's going to have a direct line of sight to how we can benefit from it as an organization in creating value. Once we're on board from an ROI perspective, this is worth the lift. I think the big question is no one has the desire to get more notifications. We are so busy and avalanched. Every campaign that I've ever been a part of, whatever behavior change we were initiating, the first thing was, I don't have the time for this. So Mark talked about how their focus is on reducing the noise. Check this out. Then I think we start asking questions, and maybe here I'm moving into future state, but when you respond, you can take me back if you weren't with me on the message. But we start to ask, if it is the message, well, when is it sent? Where is it sent? Is it email? Is it where work gets done? Perhaps we're looking at Microsoft Teams or Slack. Is there social interaction like social media? Do we now motivate through that message? Is it shorter? Is there a visual? Is there a video? Oh, if it's a video, no more than a minute, because who's got the attention span to go beyond a minute? Are these the kind of things that you would agree we would be looking at as we think about the future of work?
Yeah, exactly. And you sounded like an internal marketing agency, right? So it's like how are we going to connect with the people in a relevant way that sells? But what we're selling is belief in an organization, ultimately the mission, because people want to work for something that matters, period. You're not going to have talent if you don't have a great mission. So then all of a sudden we're being that. And yes, that's exactly where we had to go with the internal comment. And by the way, all those channels, we had all those and everyone, I mean, I don't care who it is, the core of every company problem will come down to communication of some sort. And the problem is when it comes to corporate comm, who actually owns it? I would make a point that experience should own it because that communication has to be authentic through every channel. And we shut down more channels than we opened up.
A chief experience executive with 14 years on this journey has just showed us the approach from return on investment to how to think about building your internal team. I'd love for you all drop ideas, thoughts. What did you think about Mark's approach and what could you do better? What could we do better as an emerging market? Innovators, see you all later. The way I know if the innovators are engaging is if you're subscribing, sharing, and liking the content. Let me know. It all counts and it all shows me we're on the right path. Thanks for tuning in.